This is the story of the largest fortune ever built in America, and of how the family that inherited it managed to lose all of it inside 3 generations. It's convenient to begin at a party, because the party sits very close to the moment the losing started. In the spring of 1883, 1,200 people came to a new house on 5th Avenue at the corner of 52nd Street in Manhattan. They arrived dressed as Renaissance princes, as hornets, as the electric light. The hostess, Alva Vanderbilt, received them as a Venetian noblewoman in a gown sewn with real gems. The house they stood in had taken 3 years and some $3 million to build, and the single night of entertainment inside it cost close to $250,000 more, about $7 million in today's money, spent on food, costumes, flowers, and one thing that couldn't be bought at any listed price. It's remembered as the night the Vanderbilts reached the top of American society. It was also very near the top of the family's fortune, and from there, the line ran mostly downward. To see how a costume ball ended up near the center of a collapse, you have to start with the man who made the money, because he wouldn't have come. Cornelius Vanderbilt was born on Staten Island in 1794 and left school at 11. He started with a single flat-bottomed boat ferrying passengers across New York Harbor, and he was, by every account of the people who dealt with him, coarse, barely literate, and relentless. He moved from boats to steamships to railroads, and he consolidated the lines running into New York until he controlled the artery of American commerce. When he died in 1877, he was worth around $100 million. It's worth being precise about what that meant, because the number in the title isn't an exaggeration. Measured against the size of the economy, that fortune is worth well over $100 billion in today's terms, and by some economists' reckoning, closer to $200 billion. Here's the way it lands hardest. If the Commodore had sold everything he owned at the moment he died, at full price, he would have taken 1 out of every $20 then in circulation in the entire United States. He was holding more money than the Federal Treasury. And the man who built all of that understood something about money that none of his heirs ever would. The blind spot was sitting inside the fortune from the day he died. He didn't distribute it. He left better than 95% of everything to a single son, William Henry, and next to nothing to the rest, and he did it deliberately to keep the money from scattering. That decision held the fortune together for exactly 1 generation, because William Henry had learned business at his father's elbow, and in about 8 years of running the railroads, he did the one thing that would have pleased the old man. He more than doubled it. By the mid-1880s, the Vanderbilt fortune stood above $200 million, and the same decision that protected it had also guaranteed that no one coming after would know how to keep it. Here's where the story changes direction. The men who built the fortune had been outsiders. They were rich beyond arithmetic, and old New York still wouldn't receive them. The Astors and the families around them had decided, in the unwritten way these things get decided, that the Vanderbilts were railroad money, new, rough, and not the sort one called upon. There was even a list, said to hold the 400 people who genuinely mattered in the city, and no Vanderbilt was on it. So the 3rd generation set out to buy their way onto it, and the fortune began to flow outward in pursuit of a thing the fortune alone couldn't deliver. They built. On 5th Avenue, they put up mansions so numerous the stretch became known as Vanderbilt Row. Alva's house, the one that held the ball, was a French chateau dropped onto a Manhattan corner. Then they found Newport, Rhode Island, and turned a quiet seaside town into a contest. Alva was given Marble House, which ran to around $11 million, most of it in the marble it was named for, as a birthday present. Her brother-in-law answered with The Breakers, 70 rooms above the Atlantic. Down in North Carolina, George Vanderbilt built Biltmore, 250 rooms on 125,000 acres, still the largest privately owned house in America, and he lived, for the most part, in a handful of its rooms. Not one of these houses earned $1. Every one of them only ate. The ball had a purpose past pleasure. Caroline Astor, the woman who effectively ran the 400, had never formally called on Alva Vanderbilt, and by the rules of the game, a young woman couldn't attend the ball of a family her mother didn't recognize. The Astor daughter badly wanted to come. As the story has always been told, Alva let it be known that, regrettably, the girl couldn't be invited, since the two families weren't acquainted. Within days, the Astor carriage arrived at the Vanderbilt house, and Caroline Astor's card was left at the door. The call had been made, and the door old New York had held shut against the family was at last beginning to open. It had worked, which is the part worth sitting with. The strategy of spending money to force social acceptance actually succeeded. The trouble was that it had no ceiling, because status of this kind isn't a purchase you complete, but a position you defend, every season, against everyone else doing the same thing. And the family was now committed to defending it with a fortune nobody was working to replace. While the Vanderbilts built the next cottage in Newport, Rockefeller was moving into oil. The Vanderbilts threw another ball, but the furthest the family ever went to buy its way upward wasn't a house. It was a daughter. Alva had a daughter, Consuelo, raised with the specific expectation that she would convert American railroad money into something older and rarer. In England, there was a duke, Charles Spencer Churchill, the 9th Duke of Marlborough, cousin to a young Winston Churchill, and the owner of Blenheim Palace, which he could no longer afford to keep. He needed American money. Alva wanted an English title. Consuelo wanted neither. She was in love with someone else, an American, and she said so. What happened next is set down in Consuelo's own later account. Alva confined her. She controlled who could see the girl and what she was told. At one point, Consuelo was informed that her mother had suffered a heart attack brought on by her refusal, and that continued resistance might kill her. On the morning of the wedding, in November of 1895, she was crying behind her veil, and the ceremony was held 20 minutes while she was made presentable. The settlement moved $2.5 million in railroad stock to the Duke, along with a guaranteed income. She was 18. She became the Duchess of Marlborough and used Vanderbilt money to restore a palace that would never be hers. The marriage was unhappy in the way these arranged transfers tended to be. They separated in 1906, and years later the marriage was annulled. In a detail that says something about the whole arrangement, Alva testified that she had forced her daughter into it. The title had been acquired. The money that bought it didn't come back. And if you want more stories about the fortunes that built America and the families that eventually lost them, subscribe. Because the Vanderbilt story is only the beginning. From there, the fortune goes down through ordinary mechanisms. Each generation split the money among more heirs, and each heir had been raised inside a life that assumed the money was endless and had never once been asked to produce any. Then the ground shifted underneath them. Income tax arrived, the Depression came, and the great houses turned from symbols into liabilities that no remaining fortune could keep lit. Marble House was sold. The Fifth Avenue palaces came down one at a time through the 20s and 30s and into the 40s because the land beneath them was worth more than the mansions on top, the last of them gone by 1947, replaced by office towers and shops. By one account, set down by a member of the family who wrote the story himself, the surviving Vanderbilts held a reunion at Vanderbilt University in 1973, the school the Commodore had endowed with $1 million near the end of his life. 120 of his descendants came, and among all of them, Not one was a millionaire. The largest fortune in the country had passed clean through the family and left, in real terms, nothing. It's tempting to blame the ball, or Newport, or the Duke, but the spending was the symptom. The cause sits with the man who started it, and it's stranger than simple greed. Cornelius Vanderbilt knew exactly how hard the money had been to make, because he'd made it himself, from nothing, and he understood that keeping a fortune was a different and harder skill than getting one. Knowing that, he built no way to pass the skill down. He concentrated the money in a single heir to protect it, which worked for one generation, and after that there was no one left who had learned anything except how to spend. He left them the fortune. He didn't leave them the thing that had made it, and he doesn't seem to have thought that was his to solve. The French chateau where the ball was held, the house that announced the family had arrived at the top of the world, was torn down within about 40 years of that night to make room for a store.